Very good. All right. Fantastic. All right. So, yes, welcome back, viewers. Welcome back. This is part two, and we are now halfway through the year, in theory. Also, we're now going to explore the sort of more summery, hotter months, and eventually the cold months as well. Which it might give mixed views, but we're hoping to change that in that there is some mass excitement to find in all these months of the year. However, before we do that, I would also like to introduce our our other co-host, Mr. Martin Lockwood. He's going to read for us a poem, and I've chosen a lovely railway station here for him to read from. All right, so this is called Alderstrop. It's by Edward Thomas. Martin, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Make sure am I in vision? I assume so. Okay. In that case, here we go. Um, where we live, this is a home inspired by the Cotswolds, an area of the South Midlands where Jenny, myself, and Tim actually live. And this area of the Cotswold, it extends really from Oxford in the east. The south is Bath. The north is Stratford upon Avon, Shakespeare's birthplace, and the west is where we live. It also has a railway line going through it. It's quite an important one, which connects London with the university city of Oxford, and then westwards across the Cotswolds to the cathedral cities of Worcester and Hereford on the Welsh border. And one of the villages along that line is called Addlestrop. And this is the poem written by Edward Thomas. Yes, I remember Addlestrop, the name, because one afternoon of heat, the express train drew up there unwontedly. It was late June. The steam hissed. Someone cleared his throat. No one left and no one came. On the bare platform, what I saw was Addlestrop, only the name. And willows, willow herb and grass, and meadows sweet and haycocks dry, no whit less still and lonely fair than the high cloudlets in the sky. And for that minute a blackbird sang, close by and round him, mistier, farther and farther, all the birds of Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was very well read. Yeah, and yeah, I should probably also, for humour, point out that this photograph you have is, alas, not the Cotswolds. It is in fact Cowen, which is on the current western end of the preserved Llangollen Railway. Um, and yes, and unfortunately hasn't yet been touched by the marvels of spring, because as it happens in North Wales, you do have quite a lot of rain and mist forming on before the landscape has a chance to have some vibrant flowers. But nonetheless, I still think it's a wonderful location and a wonderfully read poem. Um, and that amazing, but that will also help us kick off into the first of our highlighted species. But before we do that, we must see where we're going to see them. This is in the months of June to August. We now have um, a very sudden change of appearance as well from what you've just seen. We now have a lot of brighter, sunnier skies as well, very bright blue skies, very little clouds in sights. And I promise I'm not um, trying to lyric ELO here. It's and also look at what you've got here. You've got some grasslands showing some vibrant green scenes as well. There's lots of flowers, and you may also notice that there are photographs of the sea. And the reason for that is that, well, what's quite a common thought in the mindset of the British is uh, like we'd like to go to the seaside to spend the summer. Um, And well, why not indeed? Why not go to a lovely sunny beach and go for a lovely walk, look at the scenery, but perhaps also why not even consider go to the seaside and look for some birds that might associate themselves with there. And we'll come on to that a bit later on. But before we do that, we're going to bring to you a species of bird that very sadly is the fastest declining in all of the UK. But a very, in my view, a very important bird to be highlighted in this time of year. This is the turtle dove. I don't know how many of you here have been very lucky uh, to hear one, let alone see one. It is, as I mentioned, a very, very endangered bird in Britain, and reason for this is that, well, the main reason for its decline, aside from there being not adequate habitat, unfortunately, is they are shot on their migratory route through the Mediterranean and the Middle East to make it to continental Europe, and then the lucky ones that do eventually make it to Britain, notably southern, where there is pastoral woodland and farmland. Um, they are sadly on a very fast, steep decline. But yet, if anyone is lucky to see and hear one, the video clip you're about to see now and what it's going to play is what's described as a purr. That's a turtle dove's call. It's described as a purring coo. Have a listen and a watch. Isn't that nice? Yeah, very gentle and soothing sound. These turtle doves I filmed were seen at the Knepp Wildland, part of the Knepp estate in mid Sussex, and it's a fantastic place to see so much life around and all, and it's a place in the UK that's specially dedicated to complete rewilding, up to 3,000 hectares of the whole land is just left to grow completely wild, and as a result, it has created um, you know, untidy, but yet vitally important pastoral woodland, pastoral grassland as well. And they also allow for various farm animals, I think. But yeah, to graze the land in order to keep certain vegetation at low. And as a result, it's created the most ideal habitat for birds such as the turtle dove, where it's a rare example of where the numbers are actually increasing gradually, albeit. But yeah, elsewhere, yes, you'll have to locate yourself in mainly the southern regions and quite a few select sites at that. But yeah, the easiest I'd say is Knepp. If you ever have a chance to get there, it's well worth the long pace of walking to see what unfolds in front of you. But they're not. But if turtle doves are a challenge, well, there's some easy birds that you can go and look out for and listen in the sound clips I'm going to provide in these, which are mostly aerial feeders. The first of which is the swift. You can see on the top left here. They are what I describe as screamers, and in fact, the correct term apparently for seeing a group of them is called a screaming party. They make this scythe-like scream as they fly in midair, many meters high above, to catch insects. Here we go. If hopefully you all heard that all right. They are they are widespread, thankfully, across much of our British Isles, although unfortunately have been recently declared a red listed species for conservation concern. And the main reason for this is that their preferred nesting, their preferred places of nesting are buildings that have been built before World War II. Because unfortunately, the design after said time are unfortunately not adequate for a swift to build a nest within. And they also need high enough buildings for them to try and get in with ease and comfort. But thankfully, recent efforts include the building of Swift boxes. So if I do highly encourage giving a go to install, if you can, of course, a Swift box, will give these birds a fighting chance of survival as well. And then the next of our birds, which are also aerial feeders like our swifts, are house martins. I'm highlighting them from here because it's between the months of May and August, which are when these birds are particularly active. So the sound you're about to hear for a house martin, this one's very difficult to describe because I can't really put a word to it. It's a cross between a chirp, possibly like a almost maybe this might sound controversial, like a high-pitched frog croaking. See what you make of it as you listen. Yeah, there we are. That was rather brief. And that's usually the nature of them. They're very brief and very quick on the wing. They hunt for insects on the go. However, it's during the later months of summer, they are also can be seen very visibly on very lengthy telegraph wires as they're preparing themselves for their long migration back to Africa. Those swifts do not do this. They will be more likely gone before you even see them because they're one of our shortest staying visitors. But whereas house martins are a lot more sort of they're more socially relaxed as well. And then finally, the yellow wagtail, although isn't as common as the former, um, they are they are birds of lowland farmlands and also combined wetlands too. The they unlike their cousins, the pied and the grey wagtails, which are very common and widespread throughout much of the British Isles. The yellow wagtail is a summer visitor, uh, typically arriving between April and then making their departure by late September. However, it's in the later months of summer where they do become particularly more easily seen as they follow herds of cattle, which thus attract the specialist type of insects that they like to prey on. Um, and and the call in which a yellow wagtail makes is a sharp sort of zzz. So if anyone is familiar with a pied wagtail, this one is a little more high pitched. We'll see what you make of it. Here it goes. Yeah, there you go. That just like that, sharp sort of. Bzz. Although it is possible actually that to hear a song that a yellow wagtail makes, which I haven't yet had the privilege of hearing just yet. But just imagine that, but just going beep 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 in like a continuous song, which probably would be more likely heard in the spring months. Yeah, if anyone is very fortunate to spot one, I'd be interested to know. So their range, the yellow wagtails are primarily an eastern visiting bird, but there are also populations of them that do reside in the south of England and also in parts that they're most westerly of range, which albeit isn't that far, can go towards South Wales and actually even Worcestershire as well. They're where they're known to be spotted. But yeah, you need to. but more commonly the east and the south regions. And you need to look for herds of cattle. That's your way to spot them. The easiest way, to be fair. So now we're going to have a look at our mindful moment to conclude the segment. So I was talking earlier about the seaside and and one of the most distinct both both landscapes and soundtracks of nature is that of a seabird colony or a seabird city in this case. And one such famous example in all of Britain is RSPB's Bempton Cliffs, located on the Flamborough Headland coast. Hopefully, I've said that right. The Flamborough Head coast of the East Riding of Yorkshire, where it attracts every spring and summer. It attracts between a quarter and 500,000 different seabirds. Um, and some of which you're about to see here include the gannet, the kittiwake, the guillemot. There might possibly be some razorbills, um, and also a handful of puffins as well. But the most notable of those are the guillemot and the gannets as well. See how many of those you can spot as you immerse yourself with this video. And also for those wearing headphones, please possibly turn down your volume because unfortunately it was difficult to filter the wind that happened on this day, which is usually to be expected when you visit a cliff seaside. You will get a breeze through you. But other than that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the excitement a thriving seabird city brings you. exciting times. I promise once you look at a seabird city or a colony, it will be very difficult, I think, to then walk away afterwards to say goodbye. There's just so much going on to just set your eyes on. There's so much movement, so much to see, and there's very few places to see so much life bustling. It's a very happy place to be at. If one is fortunate enough to be able to see a seabird colony, where most of their range is usually from mostly in the northern coastal isles, most of the northern coastline. Benton Cliffs obviously is one prime example, but also the west coastland of Wales, the North Devon coast, and then, of course, ranging far northeast to the Farne Islands, until you also eventually reach notable locations like Bass Rock, the largest gannet colony, northern gannet colony in the world, and then reaching to the far north of the northwest coast of Scotland and northeast, reaching to even up to the Shetlands. Yeah, that's where you need to be going for seabird colonies. But it might even possibly be locations I haven't even mentioned. So yeah, please do comment if you know of any. Now, I'm afraid we have to move on a bit and turn our attention to as the summer season draws to a close, we're now back to looking at some more sort of dull, dimmer colors, not only of the landscape but also the sky, where we're now starting to see a little less sunshine, and we're starting to notice a bit more also wind and possibly rainfall that will occur. But notably, look at the leaves. Most of them are starting to turn. They're starting to fade from green to yellow brown. They'll also fall as well. But yet they can produce some marvelous scenery in woods uh, to give contrast of color to the landscape. And also, you might notice there's wetland scenery showing as well. That the reeds start to turn orange brown yet again. However, whilst it seems like the soundtrack of Birdsong will also start to diminish as the summer migrants have gone, there are also other birds that start to get rather active and put on a marvelous show. And the first of those we're going to look at here, which some of you might have guessed already, um, is a starling murmuration. Now, whilst it's actually more common to see in the winter months, um, it's actually from mid-October do you start to notice the starling numbers start to show they become a lot more numerous at this time of the year because they are joined by some overwintering migrants from inland Europe, possibly in the northern continents as well. They start to form in big numbers, and it's particularly at roosting time when the sun is about to set, where they congregate usually in their thousands to perform murmurations, the acrobatic flights that showcases that their safety are in numbers, and that they're also, in theory, preparing for bedtime. Though such marvelous displays can also attract attention of predators, as you're about to witness in this video clip filmed on the Isle of Wight, a starling flock that's been rather spooked by a marsh harrier that's come to observe them. Have a look. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's got its talons out, but did it catch anything? No, it didn't. No. Those starlings, luckily, live to fly and fight another day. But also, have a listen to the twittering they make. Ah, wasn't that wonderful? Starling murmurations have to be one of the world's top nature spectacles to see, and we're very fortunate here in the UK to have um, a lot of sites that host up to many multiple thousands of starlings perform these fantastic events for, all around. But I'd probably have to point out that notably, their most numerous are statistically those within the western regions of the UK. So, so to name a few examples, you've got again Ham Wall in the Somerset Levels, also Newport Wetlands in Newport, South Wales. But also, yeah, their ranges can be found in the northwest, and actually in parts of East Anglia also host starling parties to roost. But to put into context, you need to find you need to find habitats where there's cover. So starlings will roost in reeds. They'll also roost in where there's woodland cover. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention Bodmin Moor is also a famous location to see starlings. But yeah, that's what you need to do. You need to find a place of land where there's adequate cover for the starlings. In fact, actually, piers have become a recent location for starlings to take cover as well. And such notable ones include Aberystwyth and Brighton piers as well. So if you're more confined to an urban landscape, then that's piers are also a good location to spot them. But now we're going to look in this next mindful moment, a bird that perhaps isn't all that widely known for being so eventful in autumn, but yet this is the time of year in which they are at their most active and most noisy. You're about to watch a flock of bearded tits, or the real name for them is bearded reedling, because they used to be thought of as a member of the tit family, but recent research has shown that they are actually a bird of their own family and their own right. Yeah, so watch in particular how they cling on to reeds quite well and are very suited to that habitat. But notably, the sound you're supposed to hear is a sharp ping. And a bit later on in the video, that call will intensify as the numbers increase. You have a watch and immerse. Aren't they good fun to watch? Yeah, bearded reedlings are a rare species, breeding species in Britain, because they cannot survive in anywhere but the reed beds, and their populations occur where there are large, extensive reed beds for them to live and thrive. Some of you might have even noticed, what are they feeding on? It looked repulsive, and that was grit. Now, as odd as it may sound, the reason they do this and why I've highlighted it here in this video is that during the autumn months, bearded reedlings go in a transition of diet. They change from that of an insect-based to a grain-based diet. So by the time the insects have gone into hibernation, the beardies will then turn their attention to those of the grains that grow in the tops of the reeds. But unfortunately, they can't digest them quite so well. So that's why they physically swallow tiny bits of grit, and the sharp angles of said grit helps to break down the grains as they eat them. And yes, and wherever anyone is so fortunate to see these very cute little birds, one must go to extensive reeds. So to name a few examples, Radpole Lake in Weymouth hosts a stable population. The Somerset Levels again has a very healthy number of them breeding. This particular location you watched was RSPB's Leighton Moss in Lancashire in the northwest. But also East Anglia, their range is also very common on that way, and with a pocket of them also existing in northeast Scotland too. So yeah, but yeah, the habitat you need to look for is a big, healthy reed bed, and between the months of October to November is when they're at their most active, and yeah, usually more heard than seen. But yeah, that call hopefully gives you an idea. So, as we now bring this whole slideshow to full circle, we are now in the months of November to December and coming back into the winter phase. And we're now back to images of soggy, wet, grey looking landscape, possibly some frost, snow bitten areas. But you also might notice I'm also highlighting some wet lands, some estuaries, rivers, and also marshlands as well, which might seem in the eyes of a person walking in the countryside, this is far too cold and far too wet to be looking for birds, and there aren't going to be any about. You're not going to hear anything. You're wasting your time. Well, wrong. Um, at this time of the year, it becomes very numerous with the calls and numbers of wintering wildfowl. Wildfowl basically is ducks, geese, and swans, and you do have many hundreds, thousands of them that come to Britain for our milder winters. And one such example that I'm going to highlight is the Hooper swan, which, unlike our common mute swans, are only visitors for the wintering time from from their breeding grounds of Greenland and Iceland, come in their many hundreds and thousands to mainly to the eastern parts of Britain, but also in pockets of northwest and also scattered parts of the West Country. Now, I'm highlighting this because it gives off at dusk a chorus that really catches your attention. This sound you're about to hear of this is quite hard to describe. You need to listen out for sort of kind of like harmonized trumpet noises, which is what a Hooper swan call it can be described as. And during the dusk, where this sound was recorded on the ooze washes of the fens of East Anglia, they gather on floodplains and and they come to roost on where there's water for them to paddle and give off this marvelous soundtrack you're about to hear. Wow. Very marvelous. Yeah, the Ouse Washes remains one of Britain's strongholds for wintering Hooper swans, where you're most likely to see and hear them. And an interesting fact to share is that in the roughly the pre-Renaissance era, in the fens before masses of them were drained for farmland, that these swans, these Hooper swans, possibly Buick swans as well, used to be thought of as the only ever swan you'd see and hear in the British Isles because mute swans didn't come to the UK until roughly the 1700s. So up until that point, it was believed that Hoopers and Buicks were the only swans that you'd ever see, and they were considered a winter bird because that's the only time of the year that you'd see and hear them. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think for winter time, it's a marvelous song to listen out for and look for. And now we'll conclude with our final mindful moment of the whole show, uh, a celebration of wildfowl and all their different calls at Slimbridge Wetland Centre as they're all gathering for their dusk feed. I mentioned Buick swans before. This is the WWT's mascot bird, and they're most popular at Slimbridge to see and hear. Yeah, please do sit back and enjoy. That's what I consider, in my personal opinion, a truly winter wonderland. It doesn't always have to be thought of as a snow and a landscape to see. Having with expanse of wetlands with multiple numbers of ducks, geese, and swans congregating in one area, it is very much what they do at winter. It has every right to be called a winter scene as much as anything that you see around this time of year. And we're so praised to have extensive wetlands across the UK, though their range has dropped by nine. We have lost up to 90% of mass wetlands in the area, and they are just as important, if not more important, than many of our woodlands combined, because they are a vital carbon sink for combating climate change. So they're not just there for on site to attract these birds; they also play their very important role in capturing carbon to make our world a more stable place to live in. So yeah, go and find yourself a wetland around this time of the year, and So when hopefully you combat the cold and wrap up warm enough, I'm sure also in your heart you'll feel very warmed inside to see such activity through there. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end. But before we come to the questions, I will just also show here that on the left you can go to my YouTube channel to see all the mindful moments that you've just seen in this slideshow and many more, which I've filmed in the past 4 to 5 years. And for my photo and general updates, my Instagram can also be found here on the right. The name is Tim Hairday in lowercase. Um, but other than that's all I have to say for that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And Jenny, we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Tim. That was, well, I think everybody would agree. That was really fantastic, really great. Thank you very much. Do please ask Tim any questions. We'll keep the recording going for the questions and answer. But once everybody's asked all the questions they can think of, um, and if you'd like to stay on and chat, we'll stop the recording then, and you're welcome to stay on and chat as long as you'd
Yeah.
like to. So,
I will also now stop the screen sharing at this point for us to have a chance to see each other. Right, okay, and the first hand we have up is from Steve and Becky Vickers. We'll come to you first. Go ahead.
Yes, it's actually this one. Um, yes, I would like, of course, to start by apologizing for my blundering in the middle. I hadn't realized that because my this thing was plugged in, but I didn't have it in my ears, that there were people having a quite animated conversation, and I thought nobody was talking, and I apologize for that. Um, now, yes, what I'm interested in, Tim, everything about it was fantastic. What the species that particularly interests me is the Bohemian waxwing. We have been here in Woodstock, and this was one house since September 93, so it's 31 and a bit years. And we've only ever recorded 50 species of birds landing in our garden. We've had several more which go over all the time, like red kites and buzzards and such frequently fly over, but haven't landed or anything. But only once, one winter, when it was quite a bad winter, did we have a Bohemian waxwing, just the one. And it's got a prodigious appetite for eating berries. We had we have several bushes which are covered with birds of various species intended to attract birds, and the number, I would think it must have dismissed several hundred berries in a night. So what is there about a little place in Worcester, in the middle of Worcester, where I couldn't see a berry in sight, which can give you 20 of these things that I've been yearning to see another one for several years?
That's a very valid question. I think, though, that sighting I have around Worcester is possibly going to be might well be regarded as a possible one-off because the range of Bohemian waxwings doesn't typically go usually much further west than East Anglia and North Yorkshire. Um, well, you see, I don't know yet how this has happened, but in the year of 2024, there had been multiple sightings of Bohemian waxwings that have extended their range to the Midlands, also to the West Country, and even parts of southern England as well. And I think the reason for that is that notably warmer we've had notably warmer days in the months of January and February, but also wind speed and directions were of unusual recordings not known before since records began. But so thus it would perhaps, in theory, encourage the waxwings uh, by the force of that wind to come to locations where there are berries, which notably, if one is to find a waxwing, the most easy spot to look for them, if any do appear, they tend to favour supermarket car parks, or even possibly where there's industrial estates, wherever there are bushes growing berries about. It seems I don't know how, and still don't yet know why that is, but it seems that wherever there are berry bushes growing, they seem to favor those that grow at supermarkets or possibly even, yeah, industrial estates as well. For some reason I don't yet know how, that's what they seem to prefer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Now, I might need your help with this, Jenny, because a few hands did go. Ah, Chris, I just spotted yours first of all. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, I know that police are able from recordings of people's voices to tell whose voice something is. Have any efforts been made to see if it can be done with individual birds, whereby you can identify a particular bird by peculiarities in its particular song or voice, or I don't know how. And I'm thinking that possibly birds in this country also are like penguins who supposedly can recognize their chicks and their parents from their call, even amidst thousands and hundreds of thousands.
I'll try and formulate a question. You're basically asking, can birds recognize each other in their communication? Or is it, can we identify birds by the particularities?
Well, I'm assuming that birds can recognize each other as individuals, but I'm wondering if there's any way that people that are involved with birdsong can actually do something so that they can also recognize.
Ah, no, very valid. Yes. Well, this kind of action is actually still ongoing with many leading pioneers of ornithology. Um, but I guess that it's only by particular study of one species of bird, usually for a very long time, would one be able to spot the uniqueness and variations of which a particular bird gives off a call, and thus over time, as information is then shared, and hopefully as much as possible to help, does one then actually get to know and understand? I think that I don't yet know the name of this, but there's one famous study where someone had examined the songs of great tit populations in southern England and had noticed by in the same woodland over the same course of time there had been changes in the tone and the speed of the different male great tits that have sung, which is, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's described as a teacher call. Teacher, teacher, teacher. And some had noticed what a few were singing slower and others were a bit more high pitched. It was by that study of listening to it that they then worked out that there are different males, there are different individuals. So I've no doubt that there are multiple studies, but I think to find one must need to try and contact and know how. but hopefully without this sounding like an advert. I know the app Merlin is actually quite a good aid and tool to help you try and record and also spot the birds that you do hear along the way.
Yes,
But also, yeah,
add to
yeah,
that. Yeah, I was going to mention that as well, Tim. I'm sure lots of people here know of that and have used it. It's a great way of it sort of works both ways. So if you record stuff on Merlin app, then that is feeding information back to the universities and so on that are collecting that data. But also, I mean, I find it's lovely if I go out for a walk and I can hear, or maybe I can see a bird and it's too far away because I haven't got the sophisticated equipment that Tim's got, you know, to get close-ups. So I have no idea what it is. But if I record it on Merlin, as often as not, it'll tell me, oh, that's a stone chat. Oh, well, you know, it's just like a little black thing on a twig, you know, as far as, but it has an unusual call and the app will recognize its song. So, yeah.
Thank you.
that's quite all right. Ah, Denise, I've just seen your hand there.
Yeah. First of all, thanks very much, Tim. That was really, so inspiring, and really enjoyed seeing all those different clips of the birds and the sounds that they make. I was just wondering. I was thinking about this when I was walking somewhere yesterday evening, and it had been quite sunny for a change. I mean, it was about 4:30 to be precise. And I just suddenly noticed, oh, the birds are singing a lot more. Like I suddenly heard them, whereas I hadn't heard them before. Um, is that something to do with the sun coming out, or was that just a coincidence? Or was it to do with the time because it was 4:30?
Ah, so by that you're sort of describing the intensity changes, is that right?
I just like really maybe it was because I just was walking by trees, but I just really noticed that they were singing a lot more than normal.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so factors behind this, kind of almost the answers are almost kind of in your question as well. That they, yes, the amount of bird song that happens, which probably you're describing is, I think, a typical like dawn chorus that's in a garden or a woodland. That usually they are at their most intense, as the name suggests, as the sun rises, coming into dawn, and then at fairly later on, as we're already in the higher hours, there's perhaps less intensity, but it doesn't mean the song is completely gone. There'll still be some active activity, but yet also particular birds will also like to sing rather later on as the sun is then setting. So yeah, I guess overall it's mostly to do with time, but then again also there are weather conditions that will alter their behavior and will also influence why they would want to do it. I mean, notably, of course, if it rains too much, there's not going to be really a lot of motivation for them to sing. They'll just take shelter. And again, it's mostly defined by the seasons. Although, as I tried to point out, you do hear all sorts of songs all time of the year round. It's just usually dependent on the place you're looking for them at said time of the year. Yeah, there's still much to really learn and understand why these all do happen, and one must try and go out and about. And the only really you'll know is if you just go to a certain site regularly and just keep on listening and take notes.
Oh, I wonder if anyone's had the experience we were fortunate enough to have a few years ago when there was a total eclipse of the sun, and we were in a part of the world where it was total, actually in northern France in '99, was it? Uh, the most remarkable thing that we observed was that the bird song stopped for that short period of time, those few minutes when it went dark, bird song stopped. And I mean, maybe it was coincidence, but I read about it afterwards, and it does seem to be a phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
I spent the night 1999 on a beach in Devon which was covered by a total eclipse. And it was very interesting there that um, when the sun first came up and it became light, then all the seagulls started going back to sea. And then the minute it became dark, before it became absolutely dark, they started coming back home. They'd only been out about 10 minutes, but they obviously were thinking, gosh, that day went quickly. And then once the uh, eclipse had passed, they all started flying out to sea again. And I often wondered if they had thought about it or if they were just reacting to the daylight, then the lack of daylight, and then daylight again.
Yeah, very valid. That's actually a difficult one to know. And that's based on the various sort of seabird locations I've been to. Well, you can't really tell much difference actually throughout the whole time of the day, whether birds are starting to be either more active or not, whether it's by daylight or by night, because as far as I could see, they're just they're just so busy the whole day long, no matter whether it's daylight hours or night hours, they're just still active all the time long. Benton Cliffs, of course, there are still noisy birds and still those flying around the cliffs trying to get a place to land on. Which is why, partly why they're called a city, because the most common concept of a city is that, well, basically it does not sleep. There's just so much that goes on the whole entire time. But yet, when the season draws to a close, the seabirds will then start to actually be out at sea and spend their pretty much all their lives out there on open sea, until it is time for this to come back to land to breed once more. So coming to land is purposefully only to breed and raise a chick. That's brilliant. Yeah, is there anyone else? Yeah, is
Thelma.
there any other question? Oh, sorry, go on, Jenny.
Yes, in the
Oh,
last
Thelma, pardon me.
film that you had of feeding time at Slimbridge and all those thousands of birds there. Now, when you say feeding time, what does that mean? Do they have to give extra sort of seeds or something in the water for these birds? Or is, I didn't
No, it's
understand.
all right. No, it's very valid. Yes. It is known officially as a swan feed, although of course there are more than just the swans that come to it. They the Wildfowl Wetland Trust, across many of its wetland sites, including Slimbridge, quite notably, um, do recognise that they do like to come to certain sites to roost and feel safe at. But yet they also realize that, by giving them a set certain amount of feed, so not obviously too much to indulge them, just a certain set amount of seed also makes quite easy enough viewing for the people who come to watch them in the buildings and the hides that looks out to these pools.
Mm-hmm.
And also easy enough for them to see what's actually there in front of them. And it's also not just there for show. The feed is supposed to replicate the amount of either vegetation or herbs or grains that in a healthy wetland, a flock of wildfowl would also come to feed on in minimal quantities, before they then eventually carry on hooting, quacking, and goodness knows what, to each other, as they then go into bed. So the Wetland Trust specifically just give this amount of feed so it coincides with their roosting habitat, their roosting behavior, as keeps them in a healthy habit, before they then have to go about the next day's business.
Thank you.
That's all right. Yeah, we've had a lot of comments here to say thank you, and it's very marvelous, and yeah, it's only a pleasure. Do carry on. Yeah, Jenny, hopefully we're doing all right.
Do we have any more questions or comments for Tim? Otherwise, what I'm going to do is close the recording, but you're welcome to stay in the meeting. Any more questions, Denise?
The clip of the seabirds Did you just stand near the cliff's edge to take that? How did you, you must have a really super zoom camera to take that.
Yeah, no, very valid. Well, at Bempton Cliffs, they have a lot of secured platforms that do indeed overlook the cliff heads, but yeah, also safely stop you from overhanging and looking down on them. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Everywhere's all safely secured, and yeah, there are signposts to warn you never ever go right to an actual cliff edge, on on peril of your life. But yeah, so that's how I was able. And in terms of the lenses, I used mixed because I was quite fortunate at those platforms to have very close views as well as some distance. So I just mixed between a telephoto lens and one that was of a middle. So to give a rough estimate, between 75 to 300 millimeters. So as I mentioned earlier, that when I go on these trips, I just change my lenses. I change my settings depending on the distance and range of which I can see. But yeah, fortunately at Bempton, on that particular cliff edge, I had the multiple views and therefore spoilt for choice of what I can see. Now,
Robert has a question or comment.
Yes, hello. Yes, the thing that came to my mind was when you were just at the very beginning, where you were talking about Birdsong, and I was thinking because I do quite a bit of music, and it makes you wonder where is the dividing line between music, humans' music and composition and composing things, and instinct for birds, and whether they actually whether they sit down and make their own calls up or not, or whether it's part of their instinct. I just wondered about that.
oh, no, very interesting. Yeah. Um, yeah. Could you just repeat the question again? Sorry,
Yes,
just get an
well, it's more
idea.
a comment, really, Tim.
All right,
That
okay.
it's if you think about human composing music, now you might make up a tune of some sort, and that's the one thing. And then birds or bird songs, it's more sort of it's an instinctive. It goes more towards the instinctive side, doesn't it? Obviously, I mean, I don't know if they're
Yeah.
actually sitting there and working out exactly what they're going to sing. They just come out with it, don't they? They know
Yeah,
it, as it
exactly.
were.
That's it. Yeah. And you
Uh,
are right.
yeah.
It is, as part of their nature, is very much instinctive. Um, and yeah, I guess it's also behavior based as well, whether there's any sort of work they've got to do to make, like, for instance, establish a territory, and or fend off rivals. And then
Yes.
perhaps
Yes.
a certain amount of calls might start to sound rather aggressive or sort of mean sounding to each other, which to our ears sound nice, but in their world, it's added levels of stress.
Yes.
No.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure. Even things like robins. Although it's a beautiful, uh, you know, sequence of notes, or and they are notes actually. I think that they are stating definite things. And they can be quite territorial, as you say, and so there's an I don't know. There was one composer who went round. I think he recorded Birdsong, and then he tried to put it all into a musical composition, or parts of it in, which I've never really listened to too closely, but it's an idea. I don't know. I think you could say they were musical, in the music sense, if you know what I mean. In
Hmm.
one,
Yeah.
two, three, four, having a meter and all the rest of it. But it's
I
interesting.
suppose musicians can also, to some degree, act instinctively on how to write a piece of music. If, for instance, a tune catches their ears, or if
Yes,
suddenly,
definitely. Yeah.
as they're just playing along, and suddenly some sequences start to formulate a composition as they're trying to practice and play.
Yes, yes, for sure. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
and
it's
thank
all
you very
right. No,
much. A
thank
lovely,
you.
lovely evening. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, that was wonderful to share. Yes, so I'll just have a quick look. What are the comments here? Yeah, thank you. That's marvelous. Yeah, yeah. Absolute pleasure as always. Yeah. Any quick other comments or questions? Oh, Chris, you've got your hand up again.
Yes, I'm curious to know, um, if an egg is taken out of the nest of its parents and put with a different species entirely, would it then know the song of its own species, or would it adopt the song of its adopted parents?
Good question. Well, it's usually very rare for another egg to be put in a nest of another bird, unless this has been done illegally and do not encourage it at all. But there is obviously a naturalized one. Most of you will probably know a cuckoo lays an egg in the nest of another bird. Um, and thus it will push out the egg of the native nest, and then the cuckoo chick will thus then be reared by the parenting bird of said nest. And I think the cuckoo chick, would thus have to then listen carefully to what, let's take for example, a reed warbler is a common nest it parasites on, and just listen to the call. It will just instinctively have to sort of tune in as it's being raised to that of a reed warbler. It's only when such a chick is there for a length of time, as I think with all young hood as we grow, will they then be attuned. But yeah, aside from a cuckoo, I don't really know of many other birds that would very easily sort of adapt, as you say, in that regard. So far, you as far as we know and understand, most bird species are highly meticulous of their care and watch very closely and will recognize what is their kind and not. Now, we've
Um,
got a couple of hands
yeah,
from
Martin and then
Martin. Yeah.
Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Good evening, folks. Yeah, I was just thinking about what's called brood parasitism, i.e., the cuckoos, and that apparently they're quite specific. Is that, for instance, if the cuckoo chick has been brought up in a reed warbler's nest, then as an adult, if it's a female and it comes to lay eggs, it will lay them in a reed warbler's nest again. Oh, as to why they do that, I really don't know. You need to ask a cuckoo, really. If you get a response or not is another matter. But I was also quite thinking about birdsong. Is that classically birds sing during the day, during daylight hours. There are some notable exceptions, owls being one, and a particularly beautiful one is a nightingale that sings in the night. And I'm privileged to actually hear one. There's a place, oddly enough, very close to the approach path into Vienna Airport, as the approach path crosses the Danube, where you have lots of nightingales. There's a reason for it, but there the sound is particularly beautiful, and it is wonderful. In pitch darkness, you can hear the sound of that bird song, and it's yeah, there's a it's not often, the nightingale, as it said something, the mystic nightingale, sings and all that kind of stuff. It really is a very mysterious sound. Enough about that. There are other people who've got their hands up.
Oh, that's all right. I'll quickly add on note that uh, in the British Isles, nightingale ranges are also not that common either. Their range is mostly in southern Britain, notably Sussex, Kent, with a few that do extend to Worcestershire and Gloucestershire as well. But yeah, if anyone is lucky enough to hear or see one, yeah, do have a listen. It's you need to listen out between April and May is when their song typically does occur. We'll now turn to Stephen Vickers.
Um, 2 points. With regard to Chris's question, it's undoubtedly true, as Martin said, that the cuckoo instinctively goes to a nest of the species up by whom it was brought, but it does not sing, of course, like a reed warbler, since every cuckoo that we're ever going to likely to see will have been brought up by some other species, and they all go cuckoo, cuckoo. So presumably there's a great role for nature rather than nurture in this. Martin, your reference to nightingales. I mean, I've always thought when Baha'u'llah describes himself as a nightingale of paradise, you can kind of imagine here he is sitting in a jail, and the same way as you see this little brown bird, and it doesn't look very impressive until it opens its mouth, you know. And once it sings and opens its mouth, you realize how wonderful it is. And that to me is always about the symbolic issue of Baha'u'llah referring to himself in that way. But we went to a feast probably 25 years ago up in further north in Oxfordshire than where we live, almost in Warwickshire. And it was very sunny days. I think it must have been more summer. I don't know when they visit, but as we came into our drive, there was this fantastic singing, and there was a group of something between 6 and 8 nightingales in the trees in our front garden singing. And it was such a beautiful singing. And they continued for a couple of hours afterwards, and then we didn't hear them anymore. That's the only time we've ever seen nightingales. But it was almost magical because we were talking as we came back from the feast about Baha'u'llah using this nightingale thing. And all of a sudden, here were all these birds singing in our garden so beautifully.
Well, on the subject of nightingale, we had a wonderful experience last year in May of going to RSBB Hynham Woods in Gloucestershire, where they organise nightingale walks at around dusk. And we started walking, and all quite enthusiastic, about half a dozen of us. And after, as we're walking around, and it's an interesting nature reserve, and they told us about how they maintain it and, kind of to encourage wildlife. But when the chap said, and, a couple of years ago, there were 20, birds that came here, and we were thinking, oh, great, And he says, and this year there's 3. And we're thinking, what are our chances of hearing one of those 3? And sadly, we didn't hear them. But it was it's always worth taking the opportunity, especially when something is as rare and precious as that particular bird song. Sorry to interject there, Robert. You have your hand up again, please.
Sorry, this is just a very short thing. It just when it just came to my mind. I was, and this was in Essex, in Essex University over by Colchester, actually. That I was visiting a Baha'i friend. His name was Fazlullah, and his mother was Olya Ruhi Sadigan, of Olya's story, and he just happened to be studying in Essex University. I was studying in the music school, so I just visited him in the university. And I had done that, and then I was just walking home from the university, which is just outside of Colchester, really. And as I was walking back, left him in the halls of residence there, I was walking back, and there was a bush, quite a bit of bush, and it was dark by then, actually. And there was a nightingale. My goodness me! And I just stood there. I mean, I must have stood there for about 15 minutes, just totally entranced. You know what I mean? And that, now I think about it, it was maybe connected to visiting Fazlullah, but it was a sort of very memorable moment, and it's a lovely thing, isn't it? So yes, sorry, thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you, Martin.
Yeah, very quick one. Here he is again. Just to say that one of the recent, quite a recent observation we made, I believe in the London area, because now they have such bright street lighting, that the urban robins will actually now sing during the night. And apparently robins have very good night vision, presumably because they've evolved for basically living on the forest in dark forests, and particularly foraging on forest floors. So, they would need good eyesight for doing that. But it's quite wonderful. I mean, I've observed it myself. Is that you have the is Robin about 11 o'clock at night, sitting on top of a lamppost, singing away. Presume it's a territorial call, and he kind of thinking, I think I get a chance to get some sleep sometime. That poor guy, but but anyway, it's the way that birds adapt to their environment, and if the environment's altered by humans, we have a habit of doing that. The birds will adapt to it as well. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Hopefully, we're doing okay for time, Jenny. But I might like to extend an invitation to some we haven't heard from yet. Now, it's quite all right if you don't want to, of course. We perfectly understand. But we wondered if from a few who haven't had a chance to raise their hand, would they like to share? Do they have a question or any comments they wish to share?
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance, and most of all, thank you very much for Tim for all the work you've put in and for such a wonderful and very entertaining and enlightening talk. Fantastic, thank you. Do feel free to leave anytime you like, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording.
I'll have a quick mention while it is on record. For those of you watching on YouTube, if you've enjoyed watching this and the previous slideshow before, please give this video a like, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and hit the bell button so you get all notifications for on. And as I usually share in all my videos, as hopefully is going to be a catchphrase, it's still working. Keep loving nature and keep spreading the love.
Wonderful.
Well done.
Thank you.
Lovely.